Hello, I'm David Tavares, Unreal Engine 5 game designer and world builder. Today I would like to show you some methods of toggling between third-person view and first-person view when in an Unreal Engine 5.1 project. This course is targeting Unreal Engine version 5.1.1, yet it may be applicable in future versions as well. Let's get started. First, I will go over a brief description of the difference between third-person and first-person view. Then, I will demonstrate the enhanced input system necessary for this setup. Next, I will go over the anatomy of your character blueprint and the associated camera settings. Finally, I will show the character blueprint code necessary for two different versions of this toggle system to operate. I will conclude this tutorial with a brief overview and suggested next steps to be taken up on your own. Let's start by defining third-person and first-person character views. Third-person characters are seen by the player somewhere on their screen. Advantages of this view choice include getting to see the surrounding artwork and actions of the character, as well as getting to see directly around the character. First-person characters allow the player to see through the character's eyes. This allows for immersion and a detailed perspective of the environmental art. Both third-person and first-person character design have their advantages and disadvantages, and often players have a preference or need for one view or the other. When designing a game, the views chosen have an effect on how the rest of the game will be designed and built. For example, if a game is designed with the purpose of only using first-person view, the character model might not be rendered at all, which means suddenly adding a third-person toggle would require additional development in other areas such as art and animation. For this reason, if you intend to use a toggle between third-person and first-person views, make sure to develop the entire project with both perspectives. Let's go ahead and jump right into the engine here. I preloaded a third-person and first-person character. As you can see here on the left is the third-person character, on the right is the first-person character. If you notice, the first-person character is just arms. It's because they didn't feel the need to render a body for the first-person kit. This is how you add them to your project. You can add a feature content pack here. There's the option for the first-person character. All you have to do is add it to project. Also for the third-person character, you can also add that to project. I've already preloaded these two. If you have your own characters, you can use those. Some characters might need some extra love and attention if you have like modular sets or anything like that. First-person characters, you notice that it only has the arms. But we want the third-person view, so we're going to have a whole body. As you can see here, because it's first-person, you just need to see the arm swing. If you play in this character, if you look down, you won't see legs. However, in the third-person, you get the whole body. We're going to convert it using the third-person character template, since it has this whole body. We're going to be using the enhanced input system, which is a feature in 5.1. Right here, you can create a input mapping context. This is necessary for the enhanced input system. This is the new way that you actually control characters. You can see here there's the jump, move, and look mappings. That's in the blueprint. It allows you to control the character, use those. Here's the jump, look, and move input actions. To create these, to create the new one, you can just duplicate it. Or if you need to create an entirely new one, you can have the input action here. So I'll just go ahead and duplicate jump, since our toggle is just going to be a one-button thing. I'll rename this view toggle so we know what it is. If you open that up, you can see here it's got the Boolean digital value. That just means it's just either you toggled it or you didn't. There's other variables there if you have something that requires like mouse input or something. You can find on the mapping context, you can find what we just created there, the input action. If you need more information on this, there's plenty of tutorials on the enhanced input system. I might create some myself in the future. Binds the key to whatever you feel comfortable. I like the left shift. You can also do anything else, like another project. I have it on tab, or what else could you do? Just like a number or just any key, really. I'll keep it to left shift for now. It's nice and easy for this simple demonstration. So let's go here to the event graph. So this is how you add an input mapping. You got to make sure that you get the controller that's attached to the enhanced input local player subsystem, that it's valid, and this is the character mapping right here. Right now it's named default. I got a couple other in here named default because the first person also calls it default. So let's go ahead just to distinguish between them. Let's go in here and rename it. That way you know you've got the right one. I'll just call it third person for now, since this is currently named third person character. See that it's still that one. So now this character has that input mapping, and these are the inputs that it already has. Movement input, jump input. If you need to get any of those, you can always import a feature pack, and then you know the code. It's really that simple. And here's the toggle view. I'll put that in. If you just type it into the event graph here, you can get the enhanced input action view toggle. I'll demonstrate a simple method of creating this toggle that we're working towards. So let's first look at this camera, the follow camera. This is where you see the character as a third person. If you notice, the first person camera was like in their body. So we can go ahead and add to the mesh a second camera. Now, two cameras aren't necessary. You'll see that in my advanced version we'll do after this. But if you do need two cameras, like just quickly jump between them, you can add it here. Please, one version you can do is you can use the parent socket to the head. That way it's rooted there. If you notice, it kind of moves with the body. Here's some settings. If you rotate it to 90 degrees on the z-axis and negative 90 on the x-axis, now it's right in the head. And you have a first-person view there. Let's bump it up a little bit, a little higher, a little more forward. So 10 and 20, that looks all right. It's basically in the head, works with the animation. If that's not something you desire, you don't have to socket it to the head, but you can. There's the third person camera. Use pawn, control rotation. Needs to be on, because if you're going to swivel your head around, you're going to need to control it there rather than the boom camera, which is a slight change because the way it behaves with the first person and third person is slightly different, so you're going to have to set the settings this way. So follow closely with those. First thing you'll have to do is deactivate the cameras with the view toggle. If you don't, then you'll have two active cameras, and that'll be very confusing. So let's rename these so we know which is which. Follow camera is the third-person camera, and the other camera is the first-person camera. Bring them both in there. They're both deactivated upon start of hitting that button, which is left shift in my case. Now you're going to want to branch. This is instead of a flip-flop. A lot of people like to use a flip-flop. However, I like to use a variable. Is first person ? There it is. The reason I use a variable is that way I can With other blueprints and other parts of the program, I can always pull up which view I'm in, just in case that matters for my future design. So since first person starts as false, the first time I hit the button, it's going to go through the branch to the false. Then I activate the first person camera. So I've started as third person, now I'm first person. You can swap this around if you want it the other way, if you want to default to first person. But the way I'm doing it is starting with third person. And then I change this variable. That way it knows that it can switch again. If you're interested in just doing the flip-flop version, if I could spell flip-flop, this is the node you use. See, it's very similar. There just wouldn't be a variable component necessary in that case. However, then you would have you wouldn't have the variable to call elsewhere to see what the character is using currently. Then you're going to want to set the user control rotation yaw. This lets you actually have more control and look around, which previously that your control rotation was over the camera boom, and now it's going to be over the actual camera, so that you just gave yourself access there. You're also going to want to grab the character movement, because this is going to change around a little bit. There's a lot of little changes, which is why people tend to choose either first person or third person for their games. And toggling it means that you have to make these adjustments. So the orient rotation of movement is off. And you're going to do the same when you go the other way. When you hit the button again, you are going to activate third person, go back to it. So you just reverse all these. We're in the other state. Make sure the third person camera is activated so you can see it. Recompile that. It's always good to compile whenever you can so you can see what's going on. Oh, and make sure to change the game mode to whatever game mode you're using. That way things are just easily tested right away. Hit play. Look, I now have control over this character. I'm in first person mode. I look down, I see my body. You couldn't do that with first person before. That's me, I'm in control. My rotation's all working. First person again. That's my body. So yeah, it's really that simple. That's the simple method. Just jump around a bit more here. You can see it's very smooth, and I can jump back and forth between first person and third person, no problem. But it's abrupt. If you want something more of a more smooth transition, I've got my advanced method here. It's a little different. You only use one camera, in fact. So let's go back into the blueprint here. That's the quick and dirty method that's commented out. It's always a good best practice to comment out any code that you write. Be as specific as you can. I'm just doing this quick, so I'll just say simple third to first person toggle. Now let's make a more advanced version. Instead of adding a different input key, I think I will just use this one again. So I'm going to break that and pull this down. Let's see here. Next step is to... All right, so this time it's not going to be on started. It's going to be on triggered. The reason is I want to sort of have kind of like a cooldown. It's gating when I hit the button. The other one I can just spam the button and go back and forth between the views. This one I'm going to have a 1 second timeline run. So we're going to use the same variable is first person. This should be used instead. I want to use both the simple and advanced method. Of course, I'd like you to make your own method and you could share that with me. So play the timeline to start. If you're not familiar with timelines, it's actually really interesting. It lets something happen over a period of time. Let's add... I'm just experimenting here. 1 second. Rename this track. So anyway, a timeline lets you just have something happen over a period of time versus happening instantly when you call it. You could set a key. I'm setting it to time 0, value 0. You could set a second key for time 1. And then hold on a second here. I might have got myself a little lost. Yeah, I don't want that. I did the wrong type. Sorry about that. I make mistakes. I'm human. So you want add a float track, not add a vector track for this. Key curve. Okay. Time 0, value 0. Add key curve. Time 1, value 1. So that's just 1 second to increase to value 1. So you're either you have it or you don't. That's 0 or 1. So I'm just having this happen over 1 second. You can have it as long as you want. If you want this to take a very long time, like 5 seconds or something. If you want it to be like really, really short, 0.1 seconds. If you want an instance, you don't even need the timeline. Just tell it to do it instantly. That's what happened in the simple version. So let's rename the track so we know what the output is to time. And you can see here it says time. So now it's going to, over the period of 1 second, change from 0 to 1. If you play it from start. If you play it from reverse, it starts at 1 and goes to 0. So now we have this variable that happens over time. And since it's 1 or 0, we can multiply it by a number to make it whatever that number is. So that sets whether it's first person or not, depending on where it branches after you hit the key. So play from reverse from end, because I want that one to be the other way around. If you notice, it now says timeline 0 for that second one that I copied. You can name the timelines different things. Like I could have named that one reverse, but we don't need that now, so I'll just continue. We're just going to use this one camera. So this camera is going to move up here, where that other camera is. So if you use this version, you don't even need the second camera. So we're going to set the arm length, because we're moving it up there. We basically need the arm length to be 0, because then it's just at that location on the body. So it's first person view. However, we want the arm length to be the full length when it's third person view. So let's make sure this math works out. So since we're going from 0 to 1, we multiply that number by 400. Why 400? That's because that is the length of the arm, the camera boom arm. So whatever that's the desired effect there is. If you want it 350, make that 350. If you want it 1,000, make it 1,000, depending how far you want the camera away from the character. You could take that same number and put it down here, and the opposite's happening because I'm playing it from reverse. So it's going to go from 400 to 0. So the length shortens when you go first person. However, that would put it like in the middle of the abdominal area, because that's where the boom is rooted right now. So we're going to have to do a little bit of a trick here, where we change the location of the boom to be up here with where the third person camera is, or sorry, first person camera, where the head is. Although this time we're not routing it to the parent socket, like we did last time. This will hinder any movement from the animation, which is fine because, people can get nauseous from all that jostling anyway. Okay, set relative location to the camera boom. It always pulls up that second one. I forget about that. All right, so this is going to be a local location. So split that pin so you can only get the X, Y, and Z. We're only going to edit the Z here. So subtract, but change this around. So we're wanting the inverse because we want the opposite for this. We're making when we want the length to be 400, we want the Z to be 0, so that's the opposite direction. And the other one, when we want it to be 0, we're going to want to move it up. So multiply by 80. The number 80, that comes from the height of the character, which is 160, so 80 is half of it. So that'll move up to the head, since it starts in the middle. I'll just make this 0. This is the camera boom's initial location. It was at 8, but that's very close to 0 in game terms and measurement. I'll move it forward a bit, 20, because that's kind of irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, but it helps it not collide with the head. And I'll do the same here so that doesn't change at all. It's always 30. See, it's the little head. That way you don't see the inside of the face. If this was a modular character, you could do something fancy like making the modular headpiece go invisible when you're in first person, but that's not necessary here. We could go forward a little bit. There's a lot of small variations you can do here. This needs to be duplicated down here, so it's following the same pattern. The inverse. That's what the 1 minus is. It makes it the inverse. So this is going to be the inverse times 80, which will bring it down to 0. And as I said, there's like this cooldown here. So when the timeline is finished, when the 1 second is up, that do once gets reset so you can do it again. Then there's this variable, the use controller rotation yaw that we mentioned up here. You got to make sure that is set properly. But this needs to be set before the do once resets in this direction. So I'll put that down here. Otherwise, you're going to be a little jostled when it happens. You can test it out if you want to see how that works out without it in this location. I'll clean up the blueprint a little bit. Feel free to test things out in different parameters. Maybe you can make a better version than the one I've got here. But this is almost finished, so we should have a little fun. Clean it up a little bit more here. When the timeline ends, the do once gets reset. That way we can toggle it once again. It's like a 1 second cooldown, basically. We got to make sure that all these other settings are still in place too, just like the simple. So let's get the character movement. Orient rotation to movement. Make sure that's all correct and in the right place. All of this code I will include in the Unreal developer community. So I'll keep a link to that in the YouTube version of this, and in the developer community you should see all these additional code that I wrote actually in the tutorial section, the written area. follow the link if you are in the YouTube version in the description below. So set the pawn rotation as well. That's the one thing that I didn't have in there. Let me make sure I get all these right. Which is supposed to be on, which is supposed to be off. You can also experiment with these if you want to do things a little bit differently. Toggle what you want. There we go. Okay, that's the correct version right here. So, pawn rotation this way, orient rotation to movement this way, and let's play. This is what I was talking about. You see, you run around, you got third person here, and whoa, zoom in, first person. So you pan in, pan out. That's the power of the timeline. And you only need one camera to do this. Pan in, pan out. I can run in all crazy directions. It's fairly smooth. Now you can improve the animations. This is just the basic animations that come with the standard template. In this tutorial, we learned two different methods to toggle from third person to first person and back the other way. A simple method that directly just swaps between the two, and an advanced method that pans smoothly between the two. I recommend you try to create your own method for your own needs, and make sure that any considerations for design and the environment match whatever you end up doing. Also, further considerations can be animations to make sure that your character looks correctly when they're moving and doing this toggling. You might want to make it so that the character is rooted there when they swap between the two for certain types of games, really depending on what you're trying to do. Make sure that your design matches the functions that you put in there. Hopefully I can make some more tutorials in the future. Thank you, and I am looking forward to see what you create.